I said, this boy or girl comes from nuns, he or she will never tell a lie. Today's mother has nothing else to do. He's fed up with her husband. The only thing that she can chase is the son. The prefect has to be 10 times more holy than the Pope.
I'm Michael Thompson, the principal of Aitchison College, and I'm joined by my headmistress, my head boy and deputy head boy, to enjoy a conversation with Syed Babar Ali about not only his time at Aitchison College, but at a school that he admits affected his life so greatly. We've been working on a series of questions for now nearly a week, and we're very hopeful this will lead to some interesting conversations and observations as we enjoy this afternoon.
Thank you, sir, for having us. It's a privilege to be here. I'm Amina Kamranji, the headmistress of senior school.
I'm Shamir Aziz. I'm the deputy head boy of Aitchison College, and I'm honored to be here as well.
Assalamu alaikum everyone. My name is Syed Babar Ali, and I'm the head boy of Aitchison College. Now, sir, for our first question, did Mr. Barry play a big part in changing Aitchison? And would it be right to call him the great modernizer of Aitchison College?
Yeah, of course, Mr. Barry followed Mr. Kelly, who stayed at Aitchison College for, I think he came around 1911 and he left in 1933. So he was there for over 20 years. And, he was worshipped by the students that studied when Mr. Kelly was there. But Mr. Barry, when he came in, prior to coming to Aitchison College, he'd been to Bishop Cotton School in Simla. And from there, he was appointed as Inspector of Schools in Rawalpindi Division. And from there, he was picked to come to Aitchison College in 1933. And he came with absolutely new ideas, modern ideas. Of course, he had to live with the old tradition of Aitchison College when it started. As you know, it was a Chiefs College. It had its own diploma. And the diploma of Chiefs College was regulated by the Home Ministry in Delhi. They had 4 or 5 Chiefs Colleges all over India, and they had about the same standard of the people who spent 8 or 10 years at college, and the diplomas was accepted for these graduates from these Chiefs Colleges to go into the civil service, to go into the legislative assembly, or to go back to many of these students were from the princely state. They could go back to the state and become a prince in their own state, and later on a ruler if they were in the right line. So it was, and Mr. Barry had to the first 2 years he spent in trying to understand and then gradually modernize. Around 1937, so this is almost 4 years after he came in, he then took away the restriction that only people belonging to a certain families or certain background could get into Aitchison. He realized that for Aitchison to make an impact and also to survive financially, he had to have more students. So he then opened up the gates and brought in students from whoever could afford to pay, but naturally they had to come from a certain strata of society. And that's how I saw the transition of Aitchison from a Chiefs College to a public school.
All right, so for our second question, what is your most vivid memory of Aitchison College?
Well, I mean, Aitchison College has been a part of my life. So the day I went to Aitchison College, I remember that day, the days I spent at Aitchison, and the day I left, I was a very sad person. So every day that I spent from 1934 October to December 1943 was I loved every minute of it because of my friends, because of my teachers, because of the environment. Everything that was there in Aitchison was a part of one's life.
Right, sir. Who would you say was your greatest mentor in Aitchison College, and who did you most look up to in school?
Well, I mean, you know, the teachers that we had at Aitchison were selected on not for academic reasons. They were selected as good mentors, as good tutors.
Yes, sir.
And each tutor, you know, treated you as his own son. Because I went to class 1, which was the lowest at that level, and graduated from HSC 2, which was the last class. And so we met or we had to interact with teachers at you know, different levels of our education and different subjects. And I cannot think of a single teacher who we did not respect. It was not out of fear. It was out of respect, because they commanded respect. They treated you in such a way that they were out to make sure that you learnt manners, you learnt the subject, you learnt how to conduct yourself, how to speak, how to dress up, how to eat, how to walk. It was forbidden for any boy to put his hands in his pockets. You know, I mean, this was something that was
Unheard of.
not accepted, not tolerated. If you were playing cricket and fielding, if you didn't walk in when the bowler was bowling, there was hell to pay. So these were things that you learned more outside the classroom than inside. And it was every minute you were learning. Of course, you made sure that you learned the subject that you were supposed to learn, whether it was the language, or it was the science subject, or mathematics. You had teachers who corrected every page, every line that you wrote. And because the classes were small, I think the maximum was 20 and minimum was 8 or 10. So you got all the attention. So it was a very wholesome way of spending time at Aitchison.
Sir, do you think you would enjoy Aitchison as much nowadays?
I wouldn't know what it is. I have been going to Aitchison regularly. I've been talking to the principal, to the headmistresses. And of course, one is always feeling that the days that you were there are not the same as today. But there is no reason why Aitchison, with all its today's amenities and all its facilities, cannot do better than what we did.
Yes, sir.
And I'm sure, I mean, in those days, it was unthinkable that an Aitchisonian would get into either Oxford, Cambridge. American universities were totally out of reach. Today, you have tens of your students going to the top universities of the world, which speaks well of the quality of education that is being imparted.
Sir, as a sort of a follow-up question, since your graduation, what are the changes you have seen at Aitchison that you most like?
It's the magnetism of the place. It pulls you.
Yes.
I love every brick on that campus, every tree, every plant. So because I had a wonderful time, and I use every excuse to go back. So I wish other people were as devoted to Aitchison as I was.
Grades do not make people. I've heard you say that.
I can tell you the students that were AAA students, or who had, you know, X number of A's, they are nowhere to be found today.
So then what does make a person, in your opinion?
I think it's a whole, you know, what you learned in the classroom, outside the classroom, in the boarding house. And I think what we were keen, or certainly what at that time, the end product was a good person, a good human being, not a nerd.
Not an nerd.
And I got a third in my senior Cambridge. I failed in my English paper and still got 2 gold medals in the same examination. Dane Bhima gold medal and Albail Singh Marshall gold medal in science and mathematics and history and geography. Because I was a good all-rounder. And Cambridge saw my result and they said, this fellow cannot fail, give him a pass. And it was Cambridge that said, on my certificate, you see, compensated failure.
So my next question is actually on that failure thing. I just want to ask you that, do you think failure is a good lesson?
Well, I didn't wish it to be that way, but I deserved the failure because I was supposed to write a letter. I still remember the question. It was, you've gone into a grocery store and what did you notice? And that was the subject that I had to write, and I wrote maybe half a page.
So do you think we reward young people nowadays a lot more than we used to be at your time at college?
No, I think reward or recognition had nothing to do with the age. It had to do with how you conducted yourself. You know, you can't command respect. You have to deserve it.
I totally agree. On that, sir, I just want to ask one thing. If you were a young parent now, would you join the WhatsApp group that we keep facing these days?
No, never. You see, I was at Aitchison. I was telling the principal the other day, my father was on the board of governors for 5 of the 9 years I was at Aitchison. He went to Aitchison College to attend the board of governors meeting. He never asked Mr. Barry once, how's my son doing? My son was there for 14 years, Heather. I never went to Aitchison to even inquire what subject he was studying. My grandson was there for 9 years. Of all the 3 of us, he did the weakest of the lot. And we found out, not from Aitchison, but later on, we found out that he was dyslexic. Aitchison couldn't find out for 10 years that he was dyslexic. So we had to then send him after his O-levels to what they call a lab school in Washington, D.C., where a friend of mine was teaching.
Okay.
Where he studied and got his American certificate to get into an American university. So, but we never bothered. I mean, Shamim Khan took a lot of interest in this boy. I knew because of my interest and friendship with Shamim Khan. But we never exchanged any word that how's my grandson doing.
That's brilliant, sir. Why do you think the change has happened, sir, then?
Because today's mother has nothing else to do. She's fed up
Unfortunately.
with her husband. The only thing that she can chase is the son.
Yeah. Very unfortunate. Thank you, sir. Over to sir.
Baba Sab, I have some questions. Do you think boys' education is still relevant as distinct from co-education or girls' education?
Well, having been brought up, I went to a nursery school which was co-education. I fell in love with the girl at the age of 4. So,
I think you've answered my question.
you know, I traced her after 40 years and knew where she was, but I didn't tell my wife about it. But anyway, when I went to Aitchison College, I thought the boys' school was a very good environment that we had. And I still feel that boys need a certain kind of environment to get into maturity and learn from growing up people. They have to be very active in games and sports, which is a boys' game. I would rather see a boys' school rather than a co-education.
I agree, sir. I agree.
If you were Prime Minister, what one key decision would you make about schooling that might change Pakistan's schooling?
I would totally empower the school management to manage the school rather than being centrally managed by a ministry or a department. And also the second thing I would do is to give higher salaries and make it on merit, teachers to be employed right from primary school to secondary to tertiary schools, so that you attract the better minds of the country into teaching as a profession. And also not only just salary, you've got to give them the respect in society, you've got to give them honor. Do you know in the olden days, the principal of government college, got a military ranking, he was always a colonel. Secondly, he had a place in the hierarchy next to the High Court judge.
Wow.
Everybody respected the principal of government college. That was the premier education institution. Of course, Aitchison was a breed apart. I mean, Principal Aitchison College had a direct contact with the governor of the province, and so he certainly enjoyed a tremendous respect and level in society. And so did the teachers. Because I can tell you, half the students during my period were non-Muslims. And I would say at least 30% of them came from the ruling families of different states, both Sikhs, Hindus, and Muslims. You had Nawab Bahalpur's children, Khairpur's children, then the Sardars of Balochistan, Buktis, Las Bela, and of course, from East Punjab, we have Maharaja Patiala, Jean, Naba, Kapurthala, and from the Kulu states, every village had a Raja. And these people, had a certain stature in society, and they would all, when they came to Aitchison College, they would touch the feet of the teachers, the Maharajas would. And that's a sign of respect.
That's a sign of respect. So where did it change?
So this was expected. I remember Maharaja Bhupinder Singh, who was, I think, one of the greatest benefactors of Aitchison College. He built the Gurdwara, and at one time, Aitchison ran out of money. So Mr. Barry called him up, and he said, I need your help. So he said, what's your problem? He said, I don't have enough students. So he rounded up 30 students from Patiala, and they were from the Sardars and everything. You go to Aitchison College.
Wow.
I remember when I was there, I had more than 30 friends from Patiala state alone. And when Bhupinder Singh came to Aitchison College, he always addressed the principal as sir, as a Maharaja of a state.
Wow.
So this was expected. I mean, it was not demanded. It was something that people felt obligated to respect an institution that provided them the knowledge and experience and the learning.
Both he and his son were test cricketers.
Yeah. He himself was a very famous cricketer himself, and not only that, he was a great patron of cricket. And his son, of course, made it to the test team. Yadvinder Singh, who got the Rivas gold medal also and became Maharaja of Patiala, one of the most handsome Aitchisonians that ever walked through the fields of Aitchison College, Yadvinder Singh. And his son is the current Maharaja of Patiala.
Baba Sahib, I wanted to ask you about your commitment to Aitchison in terms of being a donor. You've not only given in terms of your intellect and your sweat, but you've given an awful lot of money to the school too over a long period of time. I think you're the greatest benefactor since independence. It's probably a tricky question, but of all the buildings you've helped put there, which one stands out the most to you?
I've never looked at it from that point of view that I've donated this building or that building. To me, all buildings are very sacred. And as you know, when we embarked on this project to rehabilitate the old building, that to me was the most sacred of all the buildings. And we thought that was the duty of every Aitchisonian to ensure, it's almost like the Kaaba, which has to be maintained, kept, because it's a source of inspiration. It's a source of, you feel so good to walk around. And I tell you, under your stewardship, the way it has been put right, nobody else could have done it. And I felt so good yesterday when we were walking through that place, that it gave you a sense of pride and a sense of belonging, that it was as good today, perhaps better than the first day it was built.
Agreed.
And throughout all that giving, you've been an extremely modest person. And I was going to ask you a question about modesty. Do you think modesty is lacking in modern life? Is it a lost quality?
I don't think it makes a person more popular by thumping your chest.
Mm.
You know, there is an old saying in our language, do a good turn and throw it into a well. You know, forget about it. Never try and recount what you have done.
As part of leaving a message to Aitchisonians in the future, what sort of boy do you think the school should be grooming? And that must change over every decade or generation, but is there something consistent you feel should be taught?
Well, I tell you, the most important thing, and I think we at Aitchison have to work on it very hard, from the junior school to the prep school to the senior school, is for people to speak the truth. Only this morning I had a very interesting visitor who is a retired bureaucrat, is now head of the GIK Institute in Peshawar. He said that one of his favorite people who lived in Pakistan was a foreign lady who spent 50 years in the lepers colony. And one day, he was very fond of her. He used to go and spend time with her. And she said, you've been here for 50 years. What do you think is one major weakness in Pakistanis? And without batting an eye, she said, they don't speak the truth. If you can inculcate in your students, and I keep on telling at LUMS, that if somebody asks me, what is your real ambition of a student of LUMS? I said, this boy or girl comes from LUMS, he or she will never tell a lie.
Wow.
If you can achieve that, and there is no reason why, because you have them for 14 years. And if in 14 years you can't drum this into your students, then you have failed.
School seems to have taken on a lot more in the recent generation than in the past, and families have changed, different pressures. What advice would you give to young parents now?
Leave their teachers alone.
Jesus.
Don't interfere with their studies. Don't bother about their grades. Don't interfere with what subject they have to study and what not to study. Let the child decide what interests the child, what he enjoys most. I remember about a few years ago, I was talking to the former president of MIT, Chuck West. He became head of some academy in the United States. You know, that's the highest level. He had helped us in advice for the School of Science and Engineering. And I used to, whenever I had time and he had time, I used to go and pay my respects to him. Then we were talking about, you know, young generation taking up students. He said, not long ago, a niece of mine brought her son to me. And she was complaining to Dr. West. She said, the boy wants to study music, and I want him to study medicine. He said, let him study music. And he said, few years later, he became head of a music academy. And he said, let the young man or a woman follow their own instincts. Don't push them.
I think we all had one more question.
Many more.
What do you still have to achieve?
Do more.
Do more.
Sir, at one point you mentioned how at one point Aitchison didn't have any more money left. So how exactly did World War II affect the school?
Well, World War II was a bonanza because there's a very interesting story. The chief surgeon of Lahore was Dr. Dick. And Dr. Dick had his son here visiting him in 1939 and the war broke out. So Dr. Dick met Mr. Barry and he said, my son is here. He said, send him to Aitchison College. So this boy came and sure enough, he was admitted. And then Mr. Barry wrote a letter. I still remember that seeing that letter in the Civil and Military Gazette, that was the local paper here, to all the English parents whose sons had been stuck at home. And so within 3 months, we had about 60 English boys coming into Aitchison College, and that was the Churchill House. So that brought in a lot of money to Aitchison College because their parents were well appointed in their jobs. I remember one was head of the railways somewhere, another was in the army, there was people in the civil service all over India. So we had, and policemen. I remember my classmate was a fellow called Dennis Bennett. His father was he was the Inspector General of Police in the Punjab. He was the first winner of the Churchill Gold Medal, Bennett. So I was the second one. I didn't make it. But anyway, so this is how during the war we had this extra income coming into Aitchison College. I remember instead of your pants being worn out, they put a patch on the bottom of your pant, and this is because of the war you can't afford a new pant. And nobody bothered about it.
Well, sir, you just mentioned how respecting teachers is very important. So I'd just like to ask you, what were the teachers like in your time? And were there a lot of foreigners on staff?
Yeah, we had, I tell you, we had Mr. Barry was one foreigner, Mr. Gwynn was the second one, Mr. Kieran was the third one, and Mr. Hill, he was there for a short while, but then he was called to join the army. So he went away. So we had 3 foreigners, and of course they got dispensation not to join the armed forces because they were doing a good job. They were needed to teach the young men.
So what about the other teachers? What was teaching generally like at Aitchison while you were there?
Well, I was telling you that these teachers were tutors. They made sure that you behaved well.
Right.
You learnt what was taught. And all the teachers were living on the campus. So they were, and every teacher, it was his duty to supervise a game. So he not only saw you in the classroom, he saw you on the playing field also.
Playing field also.
So teachers that were selected, also they were selected on the basis of what game could they supervise or what game could they play and be it. I remember we had a person who came from London University. He was the captain of the London tennis team, C.L. Savara. We had Prem Pandey, who was on the provincial tennis team. We had Mr. Jagdish Lal, he was on the provincial cricket team. So we had people who were good tutors. Teachers, I don't know, because I was not in a position to judge whether he was a good teacher or not. But certainly they were very good coaches on the playing field.
So the sportsman spirit is one thing. Sometimes I'm sorry, but I don't see that in the young men these days that much.
That was drummed into you. I narrated it in my book also. I used to play different games, and this particular day I was playing hockey, and I so happened I was the captain of my side. And this was, 11 boys on one side, 11 boys on this. The one side had white shirts and the other had colored shirts. So I was, in those days, it was a foul to hook the stick, from the backside. You had to tackle it from front. And there was a young Sikh boy who, much shorter than me, but he was always very provocative. And he came and hooked me once. I gave him a dirty look. The second time he hooked me. The third time I raised my stick just to threaten him. And the gentleman who was in charge of hockey, he was a very fine hockey player in his days, Sardar Harnam Singh.
Okay.
He blew the whistle, called me in. He said, "You run round the field 3 times as the captain of the team, because I wanted to take the law into my own hands."
Wow.
Here, the captain of a side was put in place because I tried to do something that was not acceptable.
It leads to one key difference between the school that you were at and now, was that you had Muslims, Sikhs and Hindus, and now we don't. Do you think if the tables were reversed, the school could still, in this generation, handle that division of faith, or if things change?
Should I mean, because I was brought up there, I don't see any difference between our religion and anybody else. I mean, half the people working in this house are non-Muslims. So to me, that is totally alien.
But they're all in separate boarding houses.
Boarding house, no problem at all. I mean, my best friends were Sikhs. The closest friend I had was a Sikh, Harcharan Singh. And when I built this library, I brought her from India to inaugurate the building. The stone is still there.
You've always had that very strong connection.
Yeah. So, I mean, to me, that was, Aitchison was a wonderful learning place to take away any bias out of your mind. Religion is very personal.
I agree.
I mean, nobody stopped you from going to the church or the Gurdwara or the Mandir. But when you are outside that, then everybody is the same. Another example I give you, Michael, of sportsman's spirit. You know, in our days, house match was like a battle of Waterloo. And I remember one particular instance, we were playing Godley House. I was Jubilee House, the
The
day
boy house, yes.
And the umpire was a boy from the batting side. And nobody ever questioned the verdict of that umpire.
Well, you've often said there shouldn't be umpires in cricket, house matches.
Yeah, no, I said, I mean, one of the boys on the field should be umpiring. You don't want to get a professional umpire. They should trust anybody who puts on a white coat.
And you feel that way about examinations as well, with invigilation?
Yes, I am a great believer that you should have no invigilator during examination. Trust the boys. They'll cheat once, they'll cheat twice. And you'll always find out who's cheating.
You can't find out. I agree. As a teacher, when you're checking, you can definitely find out.
And then you tell those guys that you cheated, therefore you get 0. And don't let the mother come and argue.
I was just going to say, and then the WhatsApp group will start.
No, I mean, this is something. At Stanford, you have this honor system. If you are found cheating, you are out of the university.
And they don't have invigilators either.
Why can't we have it here? I'm fighting with LUMS all the time. They said we get students from Aitchison who cheat. So,
Dear me.
so why don't you start it at the junior school level?
Yes.
Pressure.
Yes.
It's a question of just taking that first leap.
First leap. First step.
I tell you, Aitchison can make the future leadership of this country. Every boy that comes out of Aitchison should be a leader, not in politics. Whatever they do in life, they are an example of having been brought up the right way. They will not cheat. They will not tell a lie. You know, if you have students like that, people will worship them. Why did people follow Mr. Jinnah? He could neither speak your language. He was not a practicing Muslim. He didn't have a beard. He couldn't talk your language. He never went to the mosque. Only on one thing, they knew that he'll never sell the Muslims to anybody else. Today, you can't tell me one individual in Pakistan that you cannot buy. And here we talk about Mr. Jinnah, we put his picture on the currency and everything else, and we are totally, sort of debasing his memory by insulting him, by doing just the opposite of what he believed in. And you as teachers have that possibility. You enforce it. Take the courage.
Is it true you had a system of daggers? Is that right? You got
Yeah, daggers and stars.
how did that work?
Daggers is who were laggard in the class. You got a dagger.
Right. And was one dagger enough, or did you need more than that?
Well, I mean, daggers were something that it was a black mark.
Yes.
I mean, nobody was thrown out because of 10 daggers. Because unfortunately, some of my very best friends were not the best students in my class. And I can tell you, there were 2 of them who failed in every subject in senior Cambridge except Urdu. One became a major in the Indian Army. The other became also a major in the Pakistan Army. And they were very dear friends of mine. One was a Sikh and the other was a Muslim.
That's interesting too, because one of your keenest areas is poetry and literature and Urdu, and you would think probably that's a weakness at the moment in education, Urdu poetry and literature.
Yeah. I think that is something which has to be introduced. It's a part of our culture, part of our. I was talking to somebody yesterday who you met him the other day, Kamal Munir.
Yes.
He's from Cambridge, and he said, he's been living in Cambridge abroad. His kids were born there, and he said, one of my greatest regrets is that my children have no love for Urdu. And he said, if you don't love your language, you'll not love your country. It's a pull that will bring you back. Your parents, meanwhile pass away and they are gone, elders are gone. So the thing that will bring you back is you want to hear your music, you want to hear your poetry, you want to hear your language, and that you can't get abroad.
You can't. True. Very, very true.
So, young men, you are custodians of tomorrow's life. So, conduct yourself in such a way that you are a pride to Aitchison, to your family, to your country. Work hard. There is no shortcut, and work honestly. Don't try and get to a place which you don't deserve.
Yes, sir. For sure.
I've had parents coming to me, can you get my son appointed as a prefect?
That's extraordinary.
Can my son get a medal? I said, what are you talking?
It's sad, actually,
They think
sir.
they can buy anything. Huh?
That's the wrong approach towards things, sir.
Then throughout life they are buying something.
Very true.
Oh, good.
So it's a very important, the badge that you're wearing, the tie that you're wearing is a big responsibility.
Yes, sir.
And you got to keep the honor of the school. Because if you do anything good, people say he's an Aitchisonian and he's done well.
Yes.
If it is otherwise, they'll say, don't blame him, don't blame Aitchison College. That's where he studied. So
Exactly.
you
sir.
carry a tremendous responsibility.
They do.
Sir, you also talked about medals. I see you were awarded 2 medals as well. What did that mean to you, and how do you feel looking up at that honor board in the old building now?
Well, I was very proud to see my name there on the board. But, I mean, those medals have been locked up by my wife, and I've told her that one goes to one granddaughter, the other goes to their granddaughter. It means nothing. It means that you were judged of what you knew at that time. And I can tell you, 90% what you've studied at Aitchison, you'll forget the day you leave it. Except the good manners that you have received at Aitchison College.
Yes, sir.
Right.
Able to read, write and think. The most important thing is you should be able to think for yourself. And the good manners that you are taught, you stick to them. Don't compromise on that.
Yes, sir.
And you as a prefect have a big responsibility to make sure that the boys under your watch follow your good example and don't do anything that will, take them away from the right path. You have to set by example. The prefect has to be 10 times more holy than the Pope.
Yes.
Michael.
That's good. I'm going to remember that line.
So if I think actually half of your passion can be found in these boys, they actually are successful even now then.
Yeah.
Seriously. If the same passion for Aitchison and the values that Aitchison actually stands for, they can actually sort of inculcate in them and sort of pass them on.
And it's not enough that you should have it. You should
Gee,
make sure that
pass it on.
everybody else that is with you should have it.
Gee, very, very important, sir. Very.
You know, I was in the first year when I was at Aitchison College, it was class 1. I was handed over the keys. In those days, every classroom had its own stationery. There was an almara. So I was a newcomer at the age of 8, given the keys of the almara that you have to take custody of all the stationery to be given to the boys of your class. They made you responsible.
That made you responsible.
I had to account for every pencil, every eraser, every copybook that was given out.
So the sense of responsibility came at a very
the
young
age of
age.
8 at Aitchison. So I think that, and of course, Michael has done a very good job in revamping the playing fields and the attention to teaching, to playing games and coaches and all that. And I was delighted to see that 3 of your young cricketers made to the under-19 team, which has not happened for a long time.
Very good effort. Yes, yes.
No, I mean in other fields also, in tennis, you should be able to produce, because very few schools can afford tennis today. It's so expensive.
It's very expensive.
And so does squash. Your boys should be able to play squash. Your Adnan was telling me yesterday that he'd been to the squash court and he thought that, you know, this young man was brought in here because he was suffering from asthma. And the doctor said that the only way you can get rid of asthma is to play squash. Adnan Asad, you know, the feather with the beard?
Yes, yes. Oh, yes, of course. Yes, yes.
So
I was with him at the squash course.
So he became a very good squash player. And so he mentioned to me that he'd been to the squash court yesterday, and so and squash is something that your students should be able to play, so there's no reason why you cannot produce a country or a province squash champion.
And hockey as well. And
hockey, yes, you've
very
got
well.
I saw some boys on the field and practicing, which is very good. No, they. I'd like to come and talk to the hockey coach. I think they're too soft with the students. They have to drill them hard.
I suppose you can't remember the school during a pandemic.
We don't have such. No, but the boys that come there, they should be able to take, whatever you do, you should take it seriously.
Yeah. Well, I will say thank you, and in particular, I would like to record my great appreciation to Baba Sahib, because I worked around the world in many different contexts and many different schools, and I'm pretty sure I wouldn't have lasted this long without his contribution, mentorship, great guidance, and you are unquestionably the most remarkable person that I've had anything to do with in any school in the world. It's been an honour to be working with you.
You're too generous.
No, sir, I think I agree with him. I think at Aitchison, I've been teaching there now, it's my 15th year. And I can tell you that we've always looked at you as a very sort of the iconic figure for Aitchison. You and Aitchison for us always seemed together. We could not see Aitchison without you.
Well,
So thank you very much.
Yes, sir. I'm very grateful for this opportunity. So I would like to thank you for your time. This has been a great honor.
Thank you very much for having us, sir. It's been truly enlightening to have us.
Very good.
Thank you,
I'm
Sheikh.
so happy that I had this opportunity to talk to the young men, because they are the Aitchison of the future.
How do we make sure that that part dominates and we don't reduce education to rote learning? What's the role of teachers in that?
I think the teacher's role should be, when you have discussed a subject, you ask each one to describe it in their own language, how they have understood it. If you're more comfortable in explaining in Urdu, do that. The whole idea is, have you understood what we are talking about? Forget about the words.